then, ladies and gentlemen, we say hello and welcome to today's guest, Jim Meddick. Tell us about yourself and your comic.
Well, Martin, I guess I started out like probably a lot of cartoonists, just wanting to be a cartoonist from a young age, drawing all the time. And I remember I was very I was never anxious to show my comics to people. I would just draw them. I was sort of, even though I was the youngest of five boys in my family, my brothers were all clumped together and much older than me. So when I was coming along, my next brother in age, closest to me in age, is 11 years older than me. So I was sort of like raised as an only child, basically, and spent a lot of time in my room drawing comics. And like I said, wasn't anxious to show them to anyone. I would just draw them and then put them in like a drawer in my desk. So it was at some point in my life where my mom said, noticed I was spending so much time doing that. She said, "Hey, you're gonna have to start showing those to people if you ever want to do this professionally." So I started, starting to show them to people, and then the way I got into doing the comics currently is through the cartoon contest when I was in college. I submitted to the Tribune Company, and I was selected 1 out of 10 students to be flown to New York and sort of given a pep talk. And they didn't give me an outright contract or anything, but they were trying to encourage us to submit. So that's basically what started my serious focus on doing the comics and led to me actually doing them.
And your comic Monty, that was called Robot Man before. Can you tell us about the story and development of that comic?
Yeah, the way that came about, and that sort of really shapes the way I think the comic you see now currently. It started back in that time when I was submitting to newspapers. Newspaper syndicates with basically comics that I had done in college. One was about a writer, a science fiction writer, and he had an alien roommate in that comic. And then there was another one that was about Roman times. It was sort of like Hagar the Horrible, but it was with Roman characters. And the syndicates couldn't use either of those ideas, but they sort of had me working on the writer one, the one with the alien roommate. And the person I was submitting to at United Features Syndicate at the time was Sarah Gillespie, and she they had this that syndicate had just launched Garfield and had been very successful with all the licensing and all the toys involved with Garfield. So they actually had a guy create a toy called Robot Man and come to the syndicate and said, "Hey, I have this toy and this music for children based on this Robot Man character," and they were wondering if the syndicate could somehow create a comic based on that. And so Sarah approached me, a student, right, out of school, or just out of school. I wasn't a student anymore, but just out of college, sort of desperate to get a job. And she said, "Hey, I know you're working on this other strip, but if you think you could somehow work this character into your strip or create a strip based on this Robot Man character, we could maybe offer you a development contract, and that provided a little bit of money for me while I was working on it." So I went ahead and signed on to that, because when I actually looked at the toy Robot Man, I didn't think that they could develop a comic based on it, but I thought, well, I can. It seemed too aimed at little children, basically, and so I said, well, I'll do it and get the money and get the editorial time developing the strip, maybe learn how to do a comic, but I never thought they'd actually launch it. So it came as a big surprise when Sarah turned around after, I think it was like 6 months I worked on it. She says, "Oh, we want to do this." So, anyways, that's how that happened. And the way it transformed into Monty was, I think it was around just before the year 2000. I was renegotiating. My contract was up for renewal, and because of the way it started, I didn't have any copyright ownership of the property, and I was getting older then. I'm thinking, well, I don't want them to take this strip away from me, which basically they could legally because they own the whole copyright. Um, so in my negotiation, I was trying to get the copyright. That was one of my priorities, and it was mainly, I think, Sid Goldberg at the time I was negotiating with. He said that they would give me the copyright, but with the proviso that I do something about the Robot Man character, because I didn't realize it, but they were still paying money to the person who created that toy, Robot Man, out of the money for the comic. They were taking a percentage out of their half to pay that person, which I didn't know. So after a big argument with them for quite a while, I finally agreed to do that because I was more worried about my copyright at the time and like the future of my career doing it. I was really worried because not that Robot Man was actually that major a character, but he was obviously the named character in the strip, and so I was just very worried about what would happen. You know, having to move aside somebody that important in the strip, but I tried to write like a positive, ending to that character, and switched the emphasis to Monty, who was already in the strip. So it's quite a strange experiment in comics, I'd say.
Many cartoonists base their character on real people. Do you do that as well?
Um, I do and I don't. I mean, there's elements of myself a little bit sprinkled in a lot of the characters, I guess, because I mean that's probably unavoidable when you're trying to think of ideas. But yeah, I remember at one point I was introduced by a friend to the Myers-Briggs personality test, which I don't know if that's popular in Europe, but there's this thing, or maybe it's not even popular here anymore, but there was a point where corporations were giving employees these personality tests that were supposed to divide up your the way people think and approach problems, and I guess that would help them team people up in corporations, I guess. But anyways, I'd never even heard of a personality test, and I was really fascinated with it, and I got a copy of one and did one to find out what's my personality. And just reading about it, it just really opened my eyes. Even though I'm writing a comic and I should be know a lot about personalities and characters, it really never occurred to me that how different people can approach problems and how your personality can shape your response to things. So that really started me thinking, like when I do a character, like about basic personality traits. And so I'd say, like, for instance, Moondog is not one person, but he's based on people that I know that share those traits. Basically, somebody who's sort of avoidant and a little bit of a slacker personality and that sort of thing. So I'd say that would be an example of doing that. And the other person I was thinking of, which is one of my favorite characters, is Sedgwick. Um, I was thinking back on when I first created him, and it was around the time when I'd seen a documentary movie called Seven Up. I don't know. Are you familiar with that? That movie is a
No.
British. It was a British series. Anyways, it was an interesting series if you ever get a chance to check it out. It's a director named Michael Apted made this thing for BBC. I think it started as a TV special where he went and interviewed all these different kids at 7 years old about what they were like and what they thought their future was going to be like. And then every 7 years he would go back and revisit those kids, and as they grew up, and so it'd be the next one would be 14 up. and then he'd interview them and find out how things were going for them and how their expectations of their life changed. But anyways, in that documentary, they interviewed these very upper class kids, and there's one who was particularly a very precocious kid who claimed that at 7 years old, like they asked him what they read, and he said he read the Financial Times, which I thought was amazing. So that I think is a big influence on where Sedgwick came from. He's probably based on those like very upper class like British kids from that documentary.
Uh, how do you manage to come up with new jokes all the time? Do you have a creative strategy that you're using?
Uh, I would say that there's different ways to get jokes, and I think the easiest way is things that would just come to you. You know, when you're walking around, and you see something, and just like it almost spontaneously, an idea would come to your head, and then the only problem of writing it out is just working it into the strip. But those are the best ways to get ideas. But usually that isn't the case. Usually you sit down and well, actually I literally lie down because I once read that Woody Allen does that when he writes. That it kind of just helps you focus if you lie down on a bed, so you're not even looking out a window or looking at anything except for your page, and just really just focus on the blank page and try to come up with something. It's almost like you almost like daydream at your notebook and come up with something. I think that's really what I usually do, and it's not that easy. And I don't. That's my least favorite part of the day is when I don't have an idea and I'm trying to think of something and struggling with it. But I guess that's. Oh, and the other thing I would say to do is when that's getting too painful and too excruciating, I'll take breaks and I'll just read other cartoons, and sometimes that can help in the sense that. Especially like panel cartoons. Like I like to read The Far Side, and I read like in compilation form, like in book form, old Herman cartoons. And the thing that I find that's helpful about those is that you can just quickly go and it'll present just like comical situations, like a person on an elevator, or somebody fishing in a funny way, or something that'll just trigger an idea. Just the different categories of things that I think are funny.
Yes, I think I saw an interview on a YouTube channel with Jim Davis, Garfield's cartoonist, and he said something that his creative strategy was that he sat down and he tried to first of all imagine the personalities of the characters really intense, and then just pick a situation they would be in and imagine how would this personality interact with this particular situation. What do you think? Is that what do you think about that strategy?